Welcome back to the Next Frontiers of AI podcast, where we feature the industry pioneers who are shaping the future of AI. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Scott Hebner, your host and principal analyst for AI at SiliconANGLE Media and theCUBE Research. In this episode, we'll chart the adoption curve for Agentic AI within the technology sector with the help of EY, one of the big four global professional services firms who no doubt has their pulse on the marketplace. As we enter what many are calling the golden age of AI agents, a new market category is emerging, one that delivers on the growing demand for highly domain-specific digital workers who can reason and act and collaborate with humans to enhance decision-making and to accelerate outcomes, and even act autonomously when human involvement is not feasible or warranted. As we learned from the recent AI Agent Builder Summit hosted by theCUBE, now is the best time to build a new technology business or reset an existing business. With the emerging agentic AI technologies, innovators can now build 10 times faster, deploy products at scale, and fuel go-to-market with significantly fewer resources. And more importantly, they can move beyond targeting IT spend and target labor spend, a significantly larger untapped opportunity. This is the dawn of a new super cycle in innovation, where vertical expertise, fast iteration, and the use of AI native infrastructures will likely reshape the marketplace. And it's likely to occur faster than you think. To explore all this, I'm excited to have Ken Englund, the America's Technology Sector Growth Leader at EY, joining us today. So Ken, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, Scott, great to be here and looking forward to our conversation. It's nice to get together.
Yeah, and it's always fun doing these. You get to meet new people, and I see that we had a good cross-section of overlap at IBM.
Yeah, it's the world is small, right? From that perspective, and I was sort of smiling as I was looking at your background, and we're in the middle of another platform shift, right? A super cycle, as you like to call it. So ready for another one.
Yeah, I was in the software group. You were in the consulting.
Yep.
I guess what they called global technology global business services.
Yeah, global business service at the time. So yeah, and now I've been at EY about 7 years, so still just deep embedded in high tech industry.
That's great. So a whole bunch of enterprise experience, which is great. Yeah. And you're focused on the technology sector, correct?
Yeah, so I spend all my time in high tech, a lot of time with upstarts, new private companies, scale ups, and then a lot of time still with big high tech as well. So that's all I do day in and day out.
All right, that's great. All right, let's start, Ken, with just what is EY's view of the agentic AI marketplace, agentic AI in general, and how do you see it being different from the last 3 years of generative AI, both from a technology and a business perspective?
Yeah, I mean, a few things, Scott, I would start to maybe just to lay out our view. So agentic AI for us is, intelligent systems with autonomous agents that either have light human interaction or fully hands-off, right? So a pretty broad definition in that regard. I sort of feel in sort of UI, we're really sort of at the coming age of the discussion of what I'll call the application layer. If you think of the last 2 or 3 years, it's been really about foundational infrastructure and compute and large language models. Now we're all pretty excited about actually how does this get deployed and help an enterprise, which is a big item. And then for me, as you said, I spend my whole life in the enterprise. So while I'm super excited about the consumer tech side of AI, the light bulbs are going on of how we're going to apply this to an enterprise, right? That's really it. And then for me, the biggest thing is, I don't know about you, but this feels 5 or 10 times faster than cloud migration, right? This platform shift is light speeds. I mean, I appreciate your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I would say the aggregate of all the conversations I've had on agentic AI for the last 9 months or so would be that people would view AI assistants as what I think most people are familiar with, right? Generative AI based, they're task oriented, they help you analyze information, they can help you create content. Again, repetitive tasks it's really about the individual, right? Yeah. And generative AI has sort of created this gateway into the world of AI in a very similar way that the browser 25 years ago created a gateway into the online world. And the AI agents then take that to the next level and start to add, as you said, autonomous behavior. They can talk to each other and collaborate with each other. They have greater degrees of, let's call it reasoning, quote unquote, right? Where they can help you plan and make decisions. And they are really more than just assisting you in a task. They're actually collaborating with you as a human being to give you superpowers and to help you do higher value work even better. So not just productivity, but actual, decision making. And then agentic AI is when you wire these things together into a workflow where you have multiple humans, perhaps multiple agents that are working together. That's sort of how I would piece it all together.
Yeah, I mean, I think our framework thinking mental models are about the same. I think for us as well, I mean, a lot of discussion is technical, and I've been in it a while. I believe we'll solve the technical hurdles. What I think in the enterprise is really interesting is sort of the enterprise incumbents have a tremendous strength, as you shared on your pods before, but also they have a tremendous weakness as well, right? Like these incumbents are upstarts, and we actually think that the commercial models are changing pretty significantly. If you think about some of these native agentic AI companies, their commercial models are totally outcome based, not seat based, not transaction based. So it's the idea of creating sort of a no regret buying decision with some of these native AI companies that are going to be as important as the technology, I think.
Yeah, I actually did a podcast not too long ago with a new startup, 2 years old, called HOAI, Homeowner Association.
Okay.
And they targeted the homeowner association market. And apparently there's like 40,000 of these in the United States. They support about 40 million homes across the United States, and historically known as low rated, right? In terms of, homeowner associations are always less than 3 stars. No one's happy with them.
Yeah.
So they targeted the labor there with a set of AI agents. And they went from the end of this year, 2024, 10 customers to over 60 through April. So in the first 4 months, now covering over 1 million homes. And their secret was you target the labor spend in a very vertical market where like the big guys like Salesforce aren't going to target homeowner associations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you capture the nuances of how people work there, the knowledge work. We have to make judgments. And I think that's part of the key. And then to your point, it's not like the SaaS model of the past or the cloud model, because you're able to build off these cloud native infrastructures and build these agents quicker and even use agents to build agents.
Yeah.
So you can move so much quicker. And you're right also on the innovation cycles are just, think about it. It's only 2.5 years ago we got into generative AI, and now we're moving on. So much faster than cloud.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, for us, like when we talk, like the most important thing we talk to clients about these days are just getting their sort of agentic frameworks correct. Because our view, sort of my personal view is, you think about enterprises, they're pretty brittle, right? I mean, you've got ERPs and CRMs and enterprise data marts. To change those things is pretty difficult these days. And we see the pace of change of products, buy versus build models, like the ability to build some extensibility into these frameworks to plug in and pull out is going to be super critical in terms of just, as you mentioned, the rapid pace of innovation.
Yeah. So you guys, UI recently released your latest technology pulse poll, right? And it was focused on agentic AI. And I think it targeted technology sector. Can you just explain a little bit about the objectives of the survey and a little bit more detail on who you targeted, who participated?
Yeah, absolutely. Give you a little bit of context. So we started these surveys back in 2022, so 4 or 5 years ago. And originally they were really just to get sort of the pulse and thinking of high-tech executives around their broader industry. What ended up happening, we've conducted 6 of them. We do a couple of them a year. We just did this one in April. The last 2 years have almost all been about AI, right? So everything we talk more broadly about is narrowed down. So those are our topics. We survey 500 tech executives in companies that have 5,000 or more people. So these aren't startups, to really get a pulse of what's on their mind from that perspective. So that's a little bit of it about the background of the survey.
Yeah, the one thing that popped out to me was, what was it, 81% are highly optimistic about the potential of agentic AI and AI agents. It's a big number.
Yeah. I think 2 things I'd say there. So it actually is a big number. I think a couple really interesting things for me is, as we talk about high tech versus other industries, there's a little selection bias in there too, right? Like these are all high tech execs. All these technology waves start in high tech. And I think part of the reason for the optimum is, if you think about maybe the 2 most high value, high impact use cases today, it's around software development, coding, and customer care and agents. And I use sort of high tech as the leading indicator of that, right? They are making serious traction in those spaces from that perspective.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. And this one also jumped out at me too, the 43%, that they're actually increasing their budgets in AI, and more than half of it's going to autonomous AI, which I guess is agents, right?
Yeah. So I would say very broadly agentic AI. And I think, Scott, three things there, like you said. I mean, it's one of those surprise, not surprise. So two things I would say as we look at kind of these surveys longitudinally, the amount of money and interest people are budgeting continues to increase, 10 points up from last year. And then really, as you can feel, those dollars are now shifting away from core infrastructure, just large language models, to really agents, right? How are we going to deploy this out in the field? And, it's pretty natural, right? We're seeing direct line of sort of POCs moving into production, scale up. So the budgets are going up 10%. 90% of the survey said their budgets are increasing around AI, right?
That's pretty incredible, because the budgets, over the last couple of years have become really high anyhow for AI. So, it seems like the agentic is an added layer of additional investment on top of the core AI that's already been put in place. Is that a fair observation?
Yeah, I think of it as sort of fundamental investments have been made, and now we're sort of extracting the benefit of it from an agentic perspective. And again, what I view is more broadly, I think about sort of these workflows and cross-platform workflows as sort of inter-platform and intra, right? So a lot of the work right now is going on within these ecosystems. Intra could be Oracle, SAP, Workday, Salesforce, and everybody's starting to tilt a little eye about how do we integrate that workflow across a variety of platforms, right? And I think it's really early days, but that's where the line of sight is.
Yeah, tell me more about these numbers here, which is also very interesting, about the autonomous. A lot of progress.
Yeah, so a lot of progress. And again, I think back to the comment I made about, I'll just call it intra-platform. So within a particular infrastructure, we're seeing adoption of agents in that space around care, chat, simple knowledge tasks, and those activities. But I mean, really, we were a little bit surprised just in the pace of the next 24 months that more than half the executives are going to really expand their deployments of autonomous, right? So we really view it as sort of, this is when people are going to see work above the waterline, right? Whether you're a customer, a vendor, an employee, we've been talking about AI a lot, but it's really been building up all the things under the waterline. And now we're sort of moving into sort of what people are going to see, right? So I think, reasonably ambitious over the next 24 months to drive that agentic work forward.
Yeah, so I think what you've learned so far was that these comments are very optimistic about the potential, almost game changing when I think you see that big of a number, 81%. And they're already well invested, right? Almost half, 43% have some degree of these agents that are already deployed and increasingly autonomous, and the investment's going to go up even further. So it brings me to just like to get your view on some of the research that we did here at the Cube Research on, let me bring this up here, on the tech priorities. And basically what this is saying is, if you were to ask the technology folks, and this is not just within technology companies, but this is across both technology companies and enterprise accounts, about what are the key technologies that are really key, in terms of priorities to build out the promise of agentic AI. And the LLMs certainly make a lot of sense at the top, but some of these are really interesting.
Yeah, Scott, so maybe just to add, this is a great slide. I mean, I violently agree with sort of all of these. I think two things I'd say right off the bat, maybe just to pivot back to the prior discussion about why aren't people moving forward with AI, right? There's a small group of people, and, of them, maybe 40% of discussions around the use cases they chose didn't drive the ROI they wanted. About an equal percentage really have slowed their AI investment because they want to get data and infrastructure in place, right? So when I sort of look at this slide, I view, if you think about the LLMs, some of the work around databases overall, I would add graph databases in there as well as a big item from that perspective. And, one of the funniest conversations, at least I think it's funny, when I talk with a client or a prospect, I sort of walk in first and say, kind of, how's your data, right? And we kind of all know the answer in an enterprise. The data is tough. And then I say, well, think about your normal data, then think about adding vector databases, graph databases, other external content. Like you really have to get your act in order around that. Now, we actually think agentic RAG will solve some of this activity, right? as we go forward. But for me, I actually think the multi-agent workflows are going to be really critical from that perspective. And then the tool integration is really important. I think for me, I get excited about a really simple example is if you took an LLM, a GPT model, and you ask it to do math, right? The answers historically change. If you go back to GPT-3, maybe you get the right answer, maybe you don't. But in common terms now, these models are going to call other deterministic tool usage, right? So for me, what I get really excited about these priorities here, and it falls into decision intelligence as well, is how do we add deterministic pieces into this probabilistic model, right? That's what the enterprise is going to want. So those are really critical there. And obviously all the reasoning items are on your list, and, I violently agree with all those as well.
Yeah, my take on all this is three big things that are becoming increasingly important in the world of agentic AI, right? One is trust is becoming the currency of innovation. And it's one thing to have Gen AI assistants that are helping individual productivity. It's another whole thing to have agents working within a workflow and help you make actual, in many cases, business critical decisions. You have to be able to trust it, and trust it means humans have to trust it, and they're going to trust it more if it can explain itself on why to do something, not just tell you to do something or come up with an answer. And then, of course, you get into all the world of security, and you get in the world of privacy and, regulatory compliance issues. And so trust is a big thing. I think the second one is this notion of being able to adapt as your environment around you adapts.
Mm-hmm.
Gen AI and LLMs on their own, they basically encode what we know about the past and create correlations to help predict the future. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to make judgments into the future, it has to be able to adapt with the conditions around you, right? So it has to be adaptable. And then the third thing I think is the decision intelligence, where, again, they're going to have additional technologies built around them to actually provide the ability to make trustworthy decisions and be able to explain those decisions and do what-if analysis and counterfactual reasoning. And like you said, that's where you got to build around it with things like graph databases, knowledge graphs,
yep.
Some of the causal AI stuff.
Yep.
And I think that's what was in that line that said semantic and causal reasoning. I think the graph stuff fits in there. And I assume that's what we're moving, right? Like
no, absolutely, Scott. And I would make two other comments. So I think you totally have nailed the discussion of how do you build a confidence level. For us, two things were really interesting. We may even touch on it later, but a part of the survey, like the biggest concern of all these companies is around security and privacy. Over 3/4 of the respondents said that is their biggest gating item. A fair distance back are discussions around commercial terms and legal and all of that, but top of mind is this. And what is interesting was, if you go back a year ago, I'll describe it much broadly as observability was probably at the top of the list. How do these things work and all of that? So, Scott, to your point that these need to be trusted, we got a long ways to go, but I think in the last year, we've taken quite a step forward. If you think about the chain of thought reasoning that's occurring, like, it's not going to happen overnight, but the confidence levels and the results are definitely moving up, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey, right? There's no binary on and off, and whether you do decision intelligence or whether you're explainable. I think it's a progression, right?
Yep.
And like you said, chain of thought, and then you got semantic reasoning being the knowledge graphs that kind of understand context, and they understand relationships between entities and the meaning in terms of how they relate to each other. And then causal starts to infuse cause and effect and journey that we're going to be on here. And it was interesting that 73%, security goes back to your point a little while ago about step one is to get your data in place, right? There's no AI without an IA, and IA being an information architecture. So without data, your AI is not going to be as useful as you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
I think that's most more focused right now, is just still getting that data layer.
Yeah, it's a lifelong journey, and we're seeing, like I said, if you think about the transactional data, it continues to need to get better, and then all these other data sources, other external sources, we really think about that as a really critical item, and just a lot of work, and not a lot of people see it, right, from that perspective. So it's like digging in the trenches, but that's what you need, right?
Yeah, and get that data infrastructure in place, and then, you got to build the models and your Gen AI infrastructure on top of that, right? In cloud. So you got to have a cloud provider that can also support your private cloud infrastructure. And then you can start to build the ecosystem of models and agents around that. So it is a journey for sure.
Yeah, I think, Scott, a good segue into models, right? So like who's building them, who's buying them, and all that. And I think it's been really kind of an enlightening experience that I have seen, right? So from my view, kind of in tech, everybody sort of jumped in and thought they had to build their own models. Like that was, sort of the natural course. And back to some of the talent discussions that we'll have, like, how many data scientists and research do you want? You want to build your models. I think what we've seen personally is, it evolved from everybody wanted to build their models. I think it was fine to get a fundamental understanding of how these models work. So people should build models. But, in the broader sense, the discussion then shifted to maybe we just need to fine tune models. And that has sort of evolved as well. And actually where I'd say most enterprises are really had sort of moved down a discussion around RAG, right, from that perspective. And when you think about RAG and chunking, I mean, it's still a lot of work and a grind of a work. So, from there, I think this whole discussion around agentic RAG, which if you think about it, was a nascent idea just 12 months ago, Lang chain and all these things. And it's really only come into the consciousness in the last 6 months, 5 months. But, we actually think the number of companies that are going to have to build ground up models is going to be relatively small, right, from that perspective. And using these models in the right purpose and small language models and all of that will be the case. So that's kind of what we're seeing out there in the space. I don't know. Are you seeing something similar?
Yeah, and I'm seeing the same thing. And we call it small language models, right? But we kind of equate the S to be in small, but also specialized and sovereign and secure. Yeah. It has all the S's, right? And I think you're right on. Is you get a general purpose model as the global intelligence, sucks up the internet essentially, and then you build your domain specific, very domain specific models around it, many of which you can purchase on the open market. Like, there's over 1 million models on Hugging Face, for example. Now, bring them in, you customize them, and you have to build very few. I've also been seeing research that is showing that even when it comes to buying or to agents, that about half the companies out there plan to actually acquire agents, either as part of their SaaS applications or separately customize them and plug them into a smaller number of domain specific agents that they build that's unique to their business. So it becomes truly a composable model, right?
Yeah. No, I think I'm smiling only because my head already thinks about, like, I describe it very broadly about orchestration of agents across the enterprise, right? So not just within an individual platform or orchestrating multiple agents to accomplish a task. And my perspective right now is, like, within the major platforms, it's almost a no regret decision to apply those agents in those space, whether you're an AP or AR or quoting or something like that. That's great. But, like, to us, the real thought process is going is to who's going to win the orchestration across an enterprise. Is it going to be the traditional ERP CRM players who have incumbency, but there's quite a bit of vendor lock-in backlash? Is it going to be the hyperscalers, or is it going to be another set of orchestrators out in the market? Like, that will be the critical decision to be made. And, if you can drive some optionality and waiting to make that decision while you're doing sort of the smaller agent work, is kind of the recommendation, at least at this point, right? Things are changing pretty fast.
Yeah, and I think a big criteria for success for the agentic platforms is going to be the ability to take any agent from anywhere, regardless of origin, and plug it into a workflow. The worst thing that some of these companies can do is lock people into their platform as the only source of building agents, right?
Yeah. Well, and Scott, I'm super excited. Like, and Microsoft put a lot of attention on it last week or the week before in Build, but MCP, right, the Model Context Protocol, like, they won't be the only one, 8AA and some of these others, but, like, I'm super excited about just seeing some of these competitors at least lining up now around driving some standards, because it really, I mean, people will say it's a fancy API, but I think there's a little bit more intelligence to this, a little bit more two-way work status. So, like, seeing things like MCP are really going to make a difference. And, like, I'm not smart enough to know who's going to win the standards war, but, like, we're heading in the right direction a lot earlier than I'd say with some other platform shifts.
Yeah, well, we covered a bunch of events this month, or back, I guess it's still May. IBM announced MCP support in Watson Orchestrate. Commerce Tools, one of the bigger, commerce platforms out there, they announced MCP support. And then just recently, was it AWS? It was either AWS or SaaS, but you can already see it be getting adopted into these platforms. And again, that's going to be another key to keeping it open. So you're right. What's interesting here is the innovation cycles are moving so fast. They're moving at warp speed. Mm-hmm. You got to get out on the game's played on the field, not in the dugout. So you got to get out and start experimenting and playing with this stuff, because with innovation cycles moving that quickly, if you fall behind, you may never catch up. Where in the cloud world, and prior to that with mobile and client server and all that stuff, you had a little bit of luxury to see how things kind of shape.
Scott, it's funny you mentioned that, because I heard recently something that really interests me was we're 20 years into the cloud migration, right? So think 20 years from now in the AI migration. So what, 2045, are we still going to be migrating to AI, or is it just going to be ubiquitous, right? So it's moving a lot faster, I think. So flexibility is important.
When you see what Google put out with, was it VO, with the video, the movies, and then you see some of the videos of the prototypes of the Tesla robots, folding laundry, cooking food, you start to say, can you imagine, 5 years from now, it's going to be a whole new world.
Yeah.
Well, let's transition to one thing that's really been at the center of my attention over the last many months, which is talent.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain a little bit about the findings here? Because this could be a real problem for companies.
A few things, Scott. So I'd say this is fairly intuitive, but there's another piece of data I'll share kind of as well. So, companies, there's certainly a supply-demand imbalance, as you've talked about in the past. A lot of upskilling going on from that perspective. Still a lot of AI-specific hiring going on, and a lot of just intentional hiring overall, right? 84%. What's really interesting that isn't on this slide is 12 months ago, we asked, as far as employees and displacement of employees via AI, about 20% of the respondents said they expected displacement from AI solely, right? Not incremental add, reskilling. That number's actually moved down to about 10%, so half as much. So for us, a real keen insight here is, for these tech companies, it isn't so much about removing workforce. It's upskilling and also the belief that the total amount of work and productivity can happen, is we're going to need AI for, right? So that number's really shifted down on those who just thought this was a cost-saving exercise from that perspective.
Yeah, and as you kind of referenced, and we talked a little bit before we got started on the podcast today, and bring up one of our charts here, which I think complements what you guys found, which is our view of this emerging talent crisis. You mentioned the supply and demand gap. Our research shows that it to be about 2.3 times more demand for AI professionals than there is in the marketplace. And interesting enough, from one of the HR firms, they came out and with a study that showed 9 in 10 aren't even sure exactly what talent needs they have to have, right? They're still trying to figure out what exactly is the ideal profile of the AI talent for their organization. And obviously people are struggling to find the talent, and even the talent they got is, at risk of leaving for higher paying jobs. And because, some of this research we found 47% premium being put on finding the best AI skills out there. So there is a battle to get to the skills that you can then hire and actually retain within your business. People can't lose focus on that and the cultural elements of all this. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, no, I 100% agree. And your sort of second point is the one that to me is the most interesting about not really knowing the talent skill sets they need. And the way I think about this is things are moving pretty fast. And Scott, my reference point is how many people did we need to build compilers back in the day? Versus, how many people did we need to write assembler versus using the tools, right? And I think we're still at a very early stage as to how many people do we need to build the tools and how many people do we need to know how to use the tools, right? And that's going to continue to ebb and flow back and forth. So, there's no equilibrium in supply demand at this point. And I don't think we totally know. If somebody came to me and told me they knew what their requirements were on AI, that's where I'd have some disbelief, right?
Yeah, there's whole new professions getting created. Another thing that we had written about was software developers. Actually, this is one of my AI predictions for the year, that software developers become data scientists. And what I mean by that is, the software development profession in the SDLC, they, with the help of agents, they're actually going to be able to build AI models and build agents. And so it starts to beg the question, is there a fused profession coming up now where you're actually a software developer, two sides of the coin, right? You're a software developer, but you're also a data scientist who can build AI stuff.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
It's
really interesting, Scott, because I get a lot of people come and say, like, my kid's going to college, what should they learn and train in? And it's like, it's an impossible answer. I mean, my answer to them is a simple one. Make sure you're good at using AI tools, right? Because I don't know if being a computer scientist or a EE or an ME is going to be totally clear in 4 years. I mean, it's going to totally evolve, right, from that perspective.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think, like you said, the best thing to do is be a user of this stuff. Like, get out and use VO and all these every day. Every week there seems to be like these new things coming out from different providers, and play around with them, because I think you build your own skills around this stuff, right?
No, absolutely. And Scott, maybe the funniest, or at least the thing that brings me the most humor in the Pulse survey response was, there's obviously a high level of confidence and optimism around AI. And, we ask a question about, where are you relative to your competitors? And mind you, we asked, what's driving your AI usage? And what they, simple top three, being competitive as a company, a better customer experience, and making sure we're on point with our strategy. Like, that's the reason they say they're deploying this. So you ask them, how are you doing against your competitors, right? And nearly 60% of them say we're more competitive than the people we're chasing, right? And I describe this as like, well, that's statistically not possible that all of you could be more. It's like saying, are you an above average driver, right? So my point is just that, people have asked their executives for a ton of money to go do AI things, right? So there's a natural human point to make sure you show in best light your AI work, right, to get more funding and stuff. So my only point is that I think it's super important, while it's early days, to make sure you're benchmarking competitively outside in versus just kind of talking about stuff inside, right? So, podcasts like this, really explaining what's on the horizon to give you a yardstick to measure against your progress, I think is super important, because the yardstick's changing literally every week, right, if not every day.
Yeah, because you have the added dimension too, that there's no better time to be a startup than now, as I was kind of alluding to earlier. So you could see markets getting really disrupted again, sort of like what happened with the emergence of the internet, right? It changed everything. And you can't get overconfident. You're right. If you have 63% saying that they're ahead of their competition, something doesn't add up there. And you're not even including startups, right? This wasn't really a startup survey. Because 90% of startups, by the way, I think there's 17,000 startups in the United States alone. I think it's closer to 70,000 AI startups around the globe, and it's projected 90% of them will end up failing.
If not more, probably, Scott. I mean, in some areas though, what's important is, like, around coding tools and stuff, it's starting to narrow down to 3 or 5 major likely winners and stuff, and we'll see more of that. So I kind of think of 2026 is sort of a year of some consolidation coming up. Not totally, like, we're not going to know all the winners, but it's going to narrow down a little bit on that front as we go forward. The other thing for me, I mean, pretty much everything we've talked today about is the existing workflows, right? You think about record a report, payables, all this sort of stuff, how we apply these things. But these tools and agentic models and everything are going to drive totally new workflows. We just haven't thought about them because, we're kind of pattern matching against what's there today, right? Like, I think about, like, if you think about the sales motion in a big corporate company, at a individual or SMB, small medium business, they either pass that off to a distributor or a reseller. Like the ability to have agentic workflows in that whole sales motion, brand new workflows, right? That maybe a company just kind of outsourced to the channel, that may all change, right? So like we're thinking very traditionally about these models, but there's going to be some great new workflows that we just hadn't thought about because we didn't have the time or money or horsepower to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Deterministic and not pre-coded and pre-thought out. They learn as they go, and it can really change things. You kind of alluded to the overconfidence could actually become an inhibitor, right? If you're overconfident. Is there any other inhibitors that kind of jump out in the technology?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to me, it's ironic that would be the case, right? I think sort of that overconfidence creates blind spots, right? And I always think within tech, there's a very big non-invented here syndrome. So I think being open-minded about it. I think in broader industry sense, I think it's about taking some more calculated risks and moving forward a little bit faster in particular areas, right? And monitoring and measuring. We're definitely seeing a lot more discussion now about ROI, right? Actual measuring outcomes. So, I think that's really critical for folks to make sure they're measuring appropriately as to what they're doing. And I think up till now, it's been okay, logical investment. Let's see what happens. Now, I think it's going to look much more like a traditional investment that has happened, over the last 20 years, right? How do you fund these?
As a business?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think your survey clearly shows that technology companies are the ones that are sort of driving the rapid adoption of Agentic AI. They're out in front, right? Yep. You think this is going to overflow into other sectors pretty quickly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's happening, right? I think to the degree that the optimism will follow in these other sectors, right? And again, chat, agent, care, coding will be first, testing, all of these sort of things. It's coming. Like, I don't know an industry that isn't pretty excited and moving relatively fast. But I think they're going to continue to look in tech and say, I can move faster, right?
Yeah. And again, you got to be careful these days. You fall behind, it's going to be harder and harder to catch up because things are moving so quickly. All right. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Frankly, Ken, I can go on forever and ever here. I love having these conversations, but I really appreciate, Ken, you taking the time to be here. This was a great discussion. I think very meaningful too. It's, insights are gold, right?
Yeah. So, no, thanks, Scott. Really appreciate it and learned quite a bit from you as well. So thanks for the time.
You bet. And I look forward to keeping in touch. And, there's no doubt that we're at the entry here of the golden age of AI agents, as I said earlier. So I think this opportunity is no longer theoretical. It's real. It's growing. It's available with those that have the clarity and vision to act with urgency and just get going. I encourage you all to check out the AI Agent Builder Summit that we recently hosted on thecube.net. It's also on our YouTube channel. It featured 20 innovators from 12 companies sharing best practices on actually building AI agents and agentic workflows. I think it'll be time well spent. So again, thank you all for tuning in. Take care. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Frontiers of AI podcast. We are the leader in tech news and analysis. We'll see you next time around. Thanks, everybody.